Transferable skills.
From Cackle Media, this is Transferable Skills. I'm Noah Mishkin, and today's guest is David Boneparth, who shares his skill journey from higher education into systems and information technology within the financial services industry. I had a great time talking to David. He's full of joy and inspiration. But the thing I got most out of our conversation is recognizing David's big heart. He genuinely cares about others. He looks out for people he works with. He's intrinsically motivated to help others. And you're going to get that by listening to this conversation with David. I really enjoyed talking to him. If you liked this conversation, may I recommend you check his profile out on LinkedIn. He started a new video series that he publishes onto his LinkedIn account called Bite-Sized Business Leadership Series. They're up to about episode 8 or 9 as of this airing. Go check it out. There's a lot of great nuggets and morsels of inspiration that I think you're going to love to take back to wherever you call home or work. Disclaimer for this episode, I was in the midst of a months-long battle with a cold or bronchitis, so you can hear it in my voice. I'm a little nasally. Well, that's all I have to say about that. So with that, let's get after it. David Boneparth, thank you for being here today. Great to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Appreciate it.
We were introduced a few weeks ago by a friend who said, you got to have this guy on. This guy's amazing. He's in my network. You love him. We had a great conversation, and that's what led us to today.
Absolutely.
Where should we start?
Yeah, let's start at the beginning. Our family, like a lot of families back in the mid-'80s, made the move from New York to Florida. And in '86, laid down roots here. I'm a product of the public school system, having a mom who is a educator in the schools here in Florida, now retired, and a dad who's a financial advisor who had to figure out how to reinvent himself after making the move and for the family down here to Southeast Florida. Ultimately ended up at the University of Florida, majored in what I thought was going to be computer information science, but I quickly learned that differential equations was not my jam. So I decided that maybe I'd make a little bit of a right turn and do more of a generalized business degree. So I have a general business degree from the Warrington College of Business at the University of Florida. Very proud of that. And my school, I was there for many a championship, a lot of good runs there. During my undergraduate education and during my time at UF, I really fell in love with a lot of my involvement with the university, especially when I started getting into teaching underclassmen and really seeing how the universities prepare us as students, or try to prepare us, I should say.
Yes.
From being dependent on others, dependent on the institutions, whatever it is, to independent, right? So the hope is that you can grow as a human being and eventually be a productive member of society. So I enjoyed that process. I enjoyed learning about it. I enjoyed teaching it for as much as they let me do that. I graduated in 2005 with my undergrad, and little did we know at that time that we would soon be heading into the Great Recession and a very tough time. So maybe the choices I made and maybe some of the opportunities that were afforded to me were actually things that I just lucked out being able to experience.
I've often mentioned this before. When people talk about one's success or opportunities, you often don't hear about the ones that weren't successful, even from the same individuals that are telling their success stories. They often leave out the 10 versions that they started with. There are so many variables that are out of our control that could lead towards either success or failure.
Yeah, we all would love to have a crystal ball to be able to say, hey, this is where this stuff is going. But sometimes, like you said, you hit it on the head and sometimes you don't. And that's the way it is.
So 2005, heading into a recession,
Yep.
What choices did you make at that
Yeah.
time?
So here I am with this generalized business degree. And I guess I didn't have many options other than one that really hit the desk, which was, hey, we really like what you're doing here at the university. Do you want to stay around and help us build this degree program that we're about to launch, which is at the graduate level in entrepreneurship? And so I said, well, that sounds intriguing. I said, an opportunity to work for a largely bureaucratic institution, helping students be successful, trying my business skills and selling what is a product essentially, and doing curriculum development and figuring out ways to teach things that I grew up learning from my dad and from my grandfather and a very business minded set of family members. So I took it and I said, okay, let's go. It's an opportunity to do something new and novel. So we got together, my boss at the time being the dean's son, which was always great for us because it gave us some runway to be able to really explore deeply how we wanted to do this. We put together a curriculum. We marketed this degree program to students who were professionals. Believe it or not, we started there for folks who had been further along in their careers and were able to wanted to come back for a graduate degree and fine tune their business skills while also learning the practical side, which
Hmm.
is how do you apply this stuff? We like to say it was a merging of principles and practice, which is a very unique concept when it comes to degree programs. That was the start of a career, a 6-year career in higher education. What was beautiful about this, other than this program, was I was also invited to do a lot of other student development stuff with the students of the university along the way, which gave me that true opportunity to pursue some of the passion I had for that as I was finishing my undergraduate career. It was a very fulfilling thing. It was an opportunity to stay in higher education, which was exciting, an opportunity to develop something new, an opportunity to teach students and see the successes that they had after they left, whether it's a business they built or whether it's families, or to see that was wonderful. And also to stay out of the recession problem, the problem of this recession. And don't get me wrong, I had to hustle. I had to
Yeah.
be able to sell these degrees. If I wanted to eat and have a job, I need to get a certain number of degrees sold. And so there was a sales element to that as well.
Yeah. Big time. You're about what, 24 at that time?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, 24.
What gives you that confidence right out of college at this age to go out and sell this program to professionals? I assume many of whom are older than you, more experienced, to get them into this professional executive master's program.
Yeah, I really firmly believed in that duality of principles and practice. I had grown up with a highly entrepreneurial father who always was drilling into myself and my brother the concepts of business. And so much so that I actually started my own company as a 13-year-old, teaching the neighbors. And I live in an older person's community, right? Retirees and so forth. So I started offering to teach my neighbors and these older couples and families how to use the internet. You got to keep in mind, this was the earlier days, right? When I was growing up, right? In the 90s, of really the true, what we know as the internet today, and email and all of those services starting to come into play. So as my neighbors' grandchildren started to email them, they wanted to know how to email back. So through that experience and the learnings I got from doing that sort of business, being comfortable, not only teaching people how to do computers and stuff like that, but also being able to communicate well with them, set appointments, be accountable, right? Be able to demonstrate that I wasn't just here to play around. I also had a business, and it meant being responsible for the financial keeping and doing my taxes, right? My dad used to brag, he's 13, 14 years old and he's already got a tax return. That set of experiences really set the foundation for my ability to stand in front of people and say, hey, this is the service we have. This is what you're going to get. This is what you're going to be able to do once you finish this program, right? And it doesn't matter whether you're going to work back at IBM, right? Or whether or not you're going to go start the next Fortune 500 business. You're going to get something out of this that's going to be worthwhile to you. Because you're paying this money, they want to know what the value is. And if you can
Sure.
articulate the value, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, goals and values.
Mhm.
Setting up appointments and teaching elderly retirees how to navigate the internet, the digital era, effective communication, accountability, professionalism Is there any difference in how you approach those types of teachings to that kind of an audience versus in the undergraduate classes that you were teaching?
Yeah, all of those things play into the aspect, right? I think when you start to talk about accountability, right? Being accountable for being able to be where you need to be when you need
Yeah.
to be there.
Easy, but
And
like it's
yeah,
a remarkable how many people get that one fundamental easy thing wrong.
right.
Just show up when and where you're supposed to
Yeah.
be.
I'll even say I'm freaking out because I'm 10 minutes late for the podcast we're doing right now because I can't figure out why my camera's not working and stuff like that. And that bothers me. And I think there's a little bit of the sense of that, right? If something bothers you so much that you feel like, but especially when you're being relied upon to do something and it bothers you, that's when you know you care.
I agree. And then the question is, if it bothered you even a little bit in that moment, especially if it's lingering on in there, rattling around in your brain, now what do you take away from that? What do you learn for the next thing?
Yeah, I think it's continuing to double down and work on that. I think it's be prepared, right? Prepare
Yeah.
ahead of time, get things running and test stuff out.
That's why I think also there is a great opportunity that myself included, we often miss out on, especially with our kids, when you have an opportunity to learn when the stakes are not high. Maybe consequences is the right word, not punishment, but consequences, ramifications, the fallout of something small that happened, and how talking to my children, how I can teach them that there are consequences to things like that when the stakes are low. Why? Because the stakes only increase as you get older out into the real world. And so something like showing up late somewhere, are you going to be allowed in or are you going to be denied access? Missing your flight, as an example. I hear a lot of people who have almost like a sense of pride about how late they show up to the airport for their
Yeah.
flight. "Ah, I don't get there 45 minutes, half an hour, speed right through." Yeah. What is the cost benefit there? What are you doing with those extra 15 to 30 minutes on the front end of your trip versus if something unexpected happens that delays you and you miss that flight? Was that really worth the 30 minute that you save on the front end? So those are like consequences, and there are natural consequences to that kind of behavior. It happens. The question is, what do we take away and learn if you felt that, if you had that little feeling of that moment? Okay, now what do I take away from this?
Yeah. And then if you flip it on its head, as the example you gave, it's okay, what could I have been doing if I got there early? So a lot of times my example is I like to get there early, get settled in and get some work done so I don't have to do it later. I don't have to think about that. It's just one less
Totally.
thing to do. Adam Grant is just came out with a book, and forgive me, I don't remember the title, but I'm currently listening to it on Audible. And he says the most important thing is not necessarily being perfect. It's about growth. It's
Right.
about continuing to learn. It's about being able to stumble or make a mistake and then learn from that and grow from it and continuing to do that over and over again. And there's a ton of examples he gives, right, in this book about people who, when they tried to reach that perfection, ultimately they got in their own way. It became such a roadblock for them that they weren't able to move beyond it versus folks who use their discomfort or use the things that got in their way normally as a way to learn and a way to grow.
Sure.
And it's a very different perspective on some of the things I talk to my team about, which is ultimately we're trying to solve 85 to 90% of the problem. That 10% is usually the most expensive and the most time consuming, the most emotionally consuming part of it.
And typically not worth the effort.
Exactly. Or maybe it's worth a effort after the fact, but on a long-term horizon.
Yeah. Value add versus a necessary, a want versus a need.
Exactly. And so over my time at the university, I picked up a few things that I thought might be relevant to any type of journey I would have in my professional life. And there's a few of them. And one of them, which I didn't recognize until actually I got into my current job and profession, which kind of hit me in the face during one of I call him my big boss, my mentor, one of the conversations we were having. And so I'll share some of that with you in the audience about what do those things look like. But after 6 years of being in higher education, I decided that I wanted more. I wanted what was next. And if I wanted to continue to grow within the university environment, I would have to eventually get that PhD. And while tenure track is an interesting thing, I said, no, thank you. I'm really not interested in that right now.
Why not?
I was ready for a change and I was maybe hanging on to that collegiate feel. I'm still on that campus and I'm getting older. They're staying the same age kind of thing.
Right.
But it's time to move on and start adulting a little bit more.
Well, that the PhD falls into exactly what you're describing, that 10%. That, okay, I can achieve more here, but unless
Yeah.
I'm looking to be a career long academic and publish maybe, is that PhD really worth whatever I'm going to gain by having it?
Yeah. Maybe over the long run, monetarily, probably. But who knows? Again, we don't know. I actually also finished my master's degree in business while working for the university. So that was a good thing, right? I did get that out of it. That was very fulfilling. So then it's like, okay, no, I got to go and I want to go. So how do I go? Who do you go to? You go to friends, family, and fools. And you say, hey, who do I know? Who's my closest network? And I call up Papa Bear and I say, yo, Dad, anyone in this financial services business that you work in? And folks can look me up. I work for Ameriprise Financial right now. And then my dad was a 32-year veteran advisor, built a practice. He goes, yeah, he's going to this leadership conference down in Miami and let me see what I could do.
Obviously, he was in that world.
Yeah.
And so subconsciously, maybe it was always in the back of your head. Did you know that's an area or an industry that you wanted to explore?
It's funny you ask that because it was always a place that I was part of growing up.
Yeah.
So whether it was sitting on the floor of my dad's office, basically filing papers, or eventually learning their systems and flipping floppy disks, if you can believe it or not, for those of you know what a floppy disk is, or CDs.
We'll put that as a poll in the
Yeah.
podcast to see how many know
Oh
what that
yeah.
is.
Oh yeah. The stacks of them. And then I got involved in helping the practices, these financial services practices around the area.
It was
Then
familiar to you.
yeah.
It was
Oh,
a
the business.
It was always an
Yeah,
option to explore.
absolutely. It was also an option. Do you want to go into financial services? Do you want to
Right.
be an advisor? Do you want to do that? And that wasn't really for me. That was for my brother. He did that and dad was there and all that. And he's doing that today. Not for me. I was very more, how can I help enable that? And that was through the technology. So I learned it along the way. So that was a great thing because when my dad connected me with someone who I didn't know at the time was going to be our CIO, and he was able to ask, what's your experience? I was able to go deeply into, hey, I sat here and I did this and I worked for the area office and all these things. And,
Yeah.
basically he had one other question, which was, do you want to move to Minneapolis? Now that to me was a harder question, taking a kid from Florida and moving him up to
Yeah.
the Midwest, right
It's
into
an
the frigid
extreme
cold,
change.
right? Very big change, but it all worked out for the best, I would say. It really was, as we talk about, a transformational change. But what was really cool is my career at the University of Florida was able to really help prepare me for this next 13, almost 14 years.
I want to hear how you characterize the skills that you picked up in higher education, helping you prepare you for that next step in financial services.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question. And so let's start with one of the more easier ones. I talk about it in terms of bureaucracy or red tape. It doesn't matter whether or not you're in a public education arena or a large corporation. When you have institutions that are so used to doing things a certain way, or people who have been there for 40 years, you're going to deal with a bunch of potential bureaucracy or red tape.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that there's not ways around the bureaucracy, there's ways through the red tape, and there's opportunities to make positive change and actually shift those things, right? Or try to remove as much of that as possible. And I think some of the other things we'll talk about have a big play into how you do that. Very simply, what we would do is we would create strong relationships with those who can do. An example in higher education would be we needed to rely on the admissions office, the generalized admissions office at the university, to do some of the things we needed to do in order to get people admitted to the program. we would create good relationships with these folks, right? And basically have a personal touch to it. Rather than sending emails, we would walk things over personally.
Yeah.
We would say, hello, thank you for all you do for us. And then at the end of the year, as simple as buying them a tin of popcorn and having them be able to share it with the office went a long way. It's the little things to be able to do that.
Yeah, because it's not about the popcorn. It's about the thought. It's that you were thinking about them. You went out of your way and did something for them. I've done that before. And I think that sentiment is recognized and it does go a long way. Relationships are really important.
Yeah. And so that translates very deeply into my work at Ameriprise. We're very procedural, if not more stringent when it comes to compliance and being able to do certain things, not do certain things. Being able to get things out of the way for my team to be successful was a big thing. A good example and a fun story. So I happened to be sitting at one of the local watering holes here in South Florida, and a gentleman comes by, sits down, and start to chat. They go, "What do you do?" I said, "I work for IT in a big financial services company." He goes, "I work for a financial services company." I go, "What company you work for?" He goes, "Ameriprise." I go, "Well, I work for Ameriprise." He says, "How do I not know who you are?" "I'm new. I came over." And I said, "Welcome, number one. Number two, what can I do for you? Is there anything you need? Do you need some help with something?" He goes, "I just really need real-time quotes on my computer for NASDAQ trading." I go, "I know, to tell you the truth, that's one of the hardest things to get, believe it or not, because they limit that." He goes, "If you could do anything, let me know." I happen to know the person who has that control. And I said, "Give me the reason why you need it, and let me see if I can go to bat." Long story short, I call up my friend in the company and I say, "Hey, I got this high producer who's not going to abuse it. He's using it for the right things. Can you do something?" She calls him directly, gets to know him directly, create a relationship, and she takes care of him. These are the types of things, again, back to the relationships, right? To be able to go out on a limb. And I know every time I see my friend at the bar, he's always, "I can't believe you did that for me. I'm never going to forget." And then if I get a drink out of it, great, but whatever. That's not the point, right?
Yeah.
So you can see how in all these different worlds, especially these big institutions, this is something we got to contend with.
The red tape that you described at the university.
Oh, sure.
How do you approach that? How do you get through it? What is your strategy for, first of all, understanding why the red tape exists, and then how to make a case for circumnavigating it or getting through it?
Yeah. So here's a great one. So the universities are very stringent on where they accept, especially if you're going to a grad school program, where you accept an undergraduate degree from, to certifying thing to be able to be eligible for that higher degree or that master's degree. So
Yeah.
we had a student who came from a private institution, non-accredited private institution, completed the degree. It was a newer institution, but it wasn't accredited in the same way as these other institutions would have been, just because they've been around longer and that accreditation process has passed. But we really wanted this student. He was a cool dude, right? And he had a set of skills that we knew that we wanted in our program. So one of the unique things and interesting things about this school is it was founded by an alumni of the University of Florida who had made a lot of money in whatever business he invested in this higher education institution. So the thinking was, hey, if we've got an alumni who is investing in higher education and we have a student we want, and this alumni, we can only get him to feel good about what we're doing with this student who was at his school that he funded and founded, maybe we can get him to come over to the University of Florida and give some money and donate as well. So I went into the graduate school and I had to say, look, here's the case for why we should admit this student and allow this degree to be the ticket to allow him in. It meets all the criteria. We had comparables, did all the curriculum and everything like that. And I said, and oh, by the way, do you know that this particular person is the founder of this school, which has become a pretty significant institution in its own right now? And they said, okay, we'll grant it. But what's cool about this is that not only is it granted now, it's granted in perpetuity.
Wow.
So any student who has this degree can come in and it'll be certified as an entry a bachelor's degree to be eligible. Years later, after I left, they started building this new building. The new building was the new building for undergraduate students, which the name on the building and the primary benefactor was the founder of the university. That student came from years before when I was dealing with the admissions for him. So if you want to talk about, we talk about crystal balls, this was one, while I didn't
Yeah.
see it at the time, there was something I knew was there that I could use as a chip to be able to cut through some of the angst around this institution being what it was at the time, which now it's perfectly accredited and doing great. So
It's a great example because there's one primary and then one secondary reason for admitting any student into your program at a university. Primary reason is you believe that this person fits the criteria in order to succeed through your program and will become somebody that you can be proud of as a university, that they are an ambassador and they are a representative of your brand. You want people to go through this program and matriculate that you are proud of. The secondary reason is if they are successful and you are proud of them and they are proud of their alma mater, they will then donate and support the institution's growth for the future. The primary reason for trying to go through that red tape or around it was this person didn't fit the criteria that the university felt was necessary to have to admit a student into the program. You recognize the strengths and skills of this individual candidate and said this person would be that primary reason. They are going to build a legacy that we will be proud of. And you realize, okay, how can I be persuasive to meet the interests of the university in their decision making? Obviously, financial. It's an opportunity. Listen, this person's gonna. They come from somewhere. We're gonna be proud of them, and it's all paid off in the long run. You didn't set out for that long term. You didn't have that crystal ball, nor honestly was it necessary. You were persuasive enough because you believed in the candidate, the student.
absolutely. And that's the beauty of what our program was all about at the end of the day, was we weren't after the perfection, as I said, we're after the growth potential,
Yeah.
right? And that's the key.
I think that's a universal principle. I think that's something that we're all striving for in ourselves, our teams, our companies, the organizations we're part of. We want growth and we want to be part of that growth and we want to grow as a result of that growth.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct.
The reason I wanted to ask you more details about the red tape and how you addressed it is because whatever you want to call it, rules, red tape, that is very relatable to everyone. E- In your home as a child, how to break the rules. At most people's jobs, there's always going to be some limitations, some rules, regulations, or red tape. The question is, how do we address the red tape while achieving our goals? And it comes down to essentially, okay, why does this exist? Sometimes it's because of some historical precedent, and sometimes it's because of actual legalese, liability. But the truth is, you can't break the rules without there being repercussions. So, how can we accept the rules, but still figure out how to accomplish our goals? And so, to be able to understand how to be persuasive and how to understand the situation, the context, and then still achieve our goals is, I think, a very relatable topic, and a skill in doing so is very valuable.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree there. I think that if you're not learning something when you start to try to break norms or even understand what's going on when and why things are you're being prevented from things, or even trying to recommend changes that should occur, which are all things that you can do in your individual capacity to better your growth, so that if there's something else that's like it, you're ready for it later, then you're not getting anything out of it. It doesn't pay to continue to hit your head against the wall on something that you're never going to be able to change. It's a waste of time. But if you go after those things where there's a genuine communicable value to some alternative to whatever is standing in the way, and you push that forward and you end up being successful, not only have you learned something along the way, but you've also made a positive change that affects everybody else. And I think the university example is a good one of that. I know where we're going with this, but at least I knew I got a great candidate and I got a great person who was going to contribute to a class that was one of the best classes that we ever had.
How do we remove friction?
Yes.
That is a common theme in our lives and at work.
Hmm.
But then also we're looking for traction. Traction is that momentum. You're getting grip and it's starting to create momentum and success. And while those are exactly defined oppositely, there needs to be some friction in order to gain traction. So I think that rules are always going to exist. The question is, how do we use them? How do we understand them? And then how do we use that in a way to help us gain traction in whatever we're trying to accomplish?
Absolutely correct. You hit it right on the head. And it's funny you mentioned friction because I use that a lot of times. Is what's our job as leaders, right? It's to remove the friction within the businesses we run, especially for our people to be able to be successful.
Teaching your kids.
Yeah,
If you remove all the friction, they don't learn anything.
correct.
A new employee joining an organization who has to learn the skills necessary to do their job well, they have to learn by example. They have to learn by understanding. You can, if you understand the problem because you've experienced it, then the solution is that much more powerful and digestible and understandable, and then you grow. So you need a little bit of friction in order to gain that traction.
Absolutely. You hit it. Yeah.
This was always in the back of your head. Financial services, it's in your blood. You're surrounded by it growing up. You make that leap. What was that first experience like when you joined? What was your role? What were you doing?
Yeah. So I took the IT passion or sub passion, I should say, when I was doing it growing up. And I actually took that into a career as an formal title business systems analyst. Now, anyone in the business of IT and corporate knows that's like the general like title for anyone they don't know what to do with. So I was one of the guys who they didn't know what to do with. In fact, I happened to work for two different subsidiaries of Ameriprise when I first started. One side the business, one side the tech billable area. And so once we got that all figured out, it's like, okay, what do we do with Dave? Or do we just let him run and go? There was some structure to it. I had a boss, I had a leader, and he was working on some things. But basically, my first gig was they gave me a mop and bucket and they said, go find all the problems you can and try to solve them. And I got started in a space of really doing a lot of problem solving, trying to figure out what are those things that were maybe low risk, but high reward, right? If I could execute on them properly and do the right thing.
Was solving something that you've always been attracted to, you enjoy doing, or was that just the nature of something you had to do then?
I like the dynamic nature of it. I've always been someone who likes being in a world of dynamic work, right?
Yeah.
Something that's always interesting. And there could be multiple of these things going on, right? These dynamic things going on at once. But it was always a great opportunity to really stretch some of those skills, some of those, whether they be technical or leadership or relationship based, that I had honed throughout the years. And I'm coming off my first career. Literally, I'm on my second career. And it's adapting to a new environment, however, very similar feel, a new set of people, and having to build those connections and having to learn a heck of a lot about what this company was all about with respect to technology. I'm literally going from dealing with students to dealing with systems.
You had that familiarity with financial services. What about the technical side of it?
Yeah, I felt more comfortable with the technical side of it, actually, just based upon all of the work I've been doing in the practices for my dad when I was growing up, since at the age of 13, running that small business I was running. I didn't feel as comfortable necessarily fully understanding how to look at that stuff we were working on, that IT stuff, and applying it to the business. Because now I was looking at it from the inside of this organization versus from the outside of folks who were supported by the organization.
Yeah.
So it's a very strange feeling in terms of how do I shift gears in terms of being able to be what we called the glue. They wanted me to be this glue. You know, the business, you've been doing that, but you also know something about IT. So how do you create that stickiness where we can have you sit between and start to translate between the two?
You're like the liaison.
Yeah, exactly. Like I had to play the face of tech and the face of the field. Now, what's interesting is that's morphed over time, and I play much more of a internal leadership role, advocating for that field stuff, but also being very real about what we can and cannot do, and also applying technology. I learned technology, real technology, doing this role for 13 years. There's no doubt about it.
And I think that's a big component to a successful leader. There's a lot of things that factor into one being a successful leader. One of those things is actually having done that work yourself to be able to speak fluidly about it. Now, the technology does change, or the subject matter for whatever team you are leading does evolve and change over time. But if you have a strong foundation in that area, then you're not just somebody who's telling people what to do. You're somebody that understands enough about it to be able to help guide them. And those individuals are probably more fluent and updated with that technology and what can and can't be done.
Yep.
But at least you can trust them to do that work well under the guidance based on your history in that discipline. You know it well enough. You can now guide them and help them succeed and shine.
And I would even say they guide me more than anything else.
Yeah.
Like there's this thing that happens when you grow in a career is going from this doing to leading. I don't do a lot of keyboarding anymore.
Yeah.
And I do a lot more work making sure my team has what they need to be successful. They are job one. If they're being successful and we have goals together and we formulate them together and we're all working in a common vision, I use my top 10, which is, hey, here are the expectations I have of us as a team. I have to live up to them as well. If we're doing that, we're creating a machine. I want to hit this machine thing a little bit here because I think this is a nice transferable skill set. We will have a machine that will keep on doing what it needs to do day in and day out, and we will not have to work as hard doing it because the machine will just continue to run, which means that we will be able to spend our time on other things that help us grow, help the organization grow, and create systems and other technologies and other products that our businesses can use to be better. And getting back to the system, so think about what a system is. It's a set of process, procedure, people, technologies that come together and get built into something that enables some set of outcomes. My big boss, I learned about this concept from him probably 10 years ago when he said, Dave, just create your machine. And if you create your machine, you'll thrive. Machines, as we know, can continue to get tinkered with, fixed up, enhanced, oiled. Sometimes you got to take a part out and put a part in. Right? You got to take the mechanic out, put another mechanic in. This analogy of the machine, it hits so many things, right? And so in the university, I had a machine. What was my machine? My machine was all the process systems people that allowed me to bring students into the program, all that tech process, all that paperwork process. It's over and over again, the same thing. How do I make it better, faster, cheaper? It's all of the program processes or the teaching, right? The classes, the weekends, the timings, all of that, right? All of that coming together as a system that would just run over and over again, tweaking along the way that made the ability for my boss and our team, right, at the university to continue to evolve and innovate with new courses, new techniques of doing things, mission trips, study trips overseas, all of those things, right? That's the machine we created there. And that machine is still running today. I'm long gone, 13 years, 14 years now. That machine is still running.
The machine is the methodology and practice.
Principles and practice, man.
The tools are the skills. You need your toolbox, the right tools and skills to do the job. And you need your methodology and practice, which is the machine in order for it to operate, function efficiently and well.
You got it.
Fantastic.
So now let's fast forward into the current world. When I started, my machine was a mop and bucket.
Yeah.
My boss has said, if he can use that mop and bucket and pick the things that need to be picked up off the ground and worked on, he's going to start to put the pieces together and the learnings and the relationships and the ability to build a team and to lead that team and to have the vision and to be able to assimilate and take the glue aspects of his role and be able to teach others how to do that and put that all together with some great development in code and technologies and everything to be able to manage a day-to-day operation that happens to pay 10,000 advisors bi-weekly perfectly every pay period with compliance. He's going to be able to build a machine that does that. That machine is going to be able to run day in and day out. And not only that, he's going to be able to give that machine to his direct reports to then take over and run themselves, and he can go and build another machine. That's what it's all about. Create the machines you can give to others to become their machines, to make their own, so that they can do it the same way you did. And that's how you move up. That's how you continue to grow. That's how you create a career path for yourself. And that's how you show you're invested in whatever it is you're doing, because you care enough to create something that if you stepped out and you left, it would continue to run day in and day out, serving your team that you've led, serving the constituents or the people who use those outcomes for a long time.
Scale.
You got it. That's exactly it. It's performance at scale. But picking the right pieces comes from the experiences in the past,
right,
that will drive making sure, whether it's red tape or any of those things, will drive those decisions to put that thing together the right way.
You figured out, I think, the success for a well-oiled machine and for a dynamic team led by somebody who understands why they're doing what they do. It's something that's near and dear to my heart. I love nothing more than to see people shine at what they do. And it sounds like you're doing that very well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And look, I could say this because a lot of folks in my generation don't stay in one place for a long time. But when you find a opportunity that affords you the ability to do what I've described, it can become a lifetime career. But I always say this, you always have to make sure you're being treated the way you want to be treated. But I guarantee you that if you find a place that appreciates you as much as you're willing to put in, it usually ends up in a pretty good situation.
Well said, indeed. David, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conversation. You've given me a lot to think about and reflect upon, and I can't wait to unpack everything that was discussed in this conversation later.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me. It was wonderful.
Good?
Good.
I want to thank Mo Eisenberg for recommending David as today's guest, and to you, our listeners, for joining us on this episode of Transferable Skills. Remember, if you found value in today's episode, please subscribe to the podcast, leave a review, and share it with your friends and network. Your support helps us reach more people who could benefit from these stories. Transferable Skills is produced by Cackle Media and music by Cost Monkey. For more resources and inspiration on leveraging your skills for a successful career transition, visit our website at www.cacklemedia.com. Follow us on social platforms at Cackle Media for updates, and join our community of listeners who are all about embracing change and growth. If you have any questions, feedback, or want to share your own career pivot story, email us at skills@cacklemedia.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening. And remember, the skills you've gained can take you anywhere. Until next time, keep exploring those transferable skills.